Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Justinmind version 8.4 release webinar. I'm Danielle Schneider, and I'll be taking you through the new features that we've released in version 8.4. All right, so here's an overview of these new features, the most notable features that we've added. We've added multi-device prototyping to this version, so now you can prototype with all different types of devices within one file. So you can prototype with a web screen, with an iPhone, with Android, with a tablet, all within one file. Next, we've added the ability to link to scenarios. So now you can show your narrative, illustrate to your stakeholders the narrative that you're trying to create without them needing to navigate to any menus in order to see that narrative. You can link to that scenario with a simple event, and you'll be able to show everything that you're trying to create. We've also added some refinement to the change style events. Now you can change just one property of an element instead of a group of properties, so it allows you to have some more detail with those changes. We've also added the ability to drag and drop to resize the canvas. So instead of having to navigate to the properties palette to change the size of the canvas, you can now just drag and drop that with just one click. We've also added many more features in this version, so I hope you'll stick around and we'll get to everything that we have on the list today. And as always, we'll have a question and answer session at the end, so if there's anything that you find confusing or would like clarification on, you can feel free to leave a question below, and we'll get to that at the end. And if there's anything more particular you would like to ask, maybe not related to this release, or bugs that you would like to report, or really anything in general, you can head over to our community forum at justinmind.com/community and ask a question there. Or if you have a subscription with us, you can go to our customer support portal and ask a question there, and we'll get back to you right away. And again, as always, this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send out this recording as an email later on. So if you need to head out early before we finish today, don't worry about it. We will send you a full version of the webinar after we're done. Okay, so let's get started. And one thing I want to illustrate to you guys here is with all of these new features that we've added, there are two main takeaways. First, showing your use cases and your user flow will be much easier using this multi-device capability, as well as linking to scenarios. Also, another feature I haven't talked about yet is resizing, or rather restricting the width of your screen or expanding it to your browser size. Through this, you can show a design to the same way as you can show a design to different people who may have different screen sizes in the same way. So for example, if you have a screen that is one particular size, but a stakeholder or a viewer may have a screen that is much larger or smaller, you can restrict the screen size so that everybody will see the same design. And all of this put together will help you illustrate that user flow and that narrative that are really important when you're trying to create a prototype. The second main takeaway is that we've added more nuance in designing. This refinement of the change style event, dragging and dropping to resize the canvas, and a feature I haven't mentioned yet, which is transparency in the color picker, will all help you make smaller alterations more quickly and define those alterations more specifically. So you won't have to waste time looking for some little thing. You can quickly make that change and make that change with more precision. All right, so the first feature I'm going to show you guys in more detail is how to prototype with different devices all within the same file. So right here I have a blank prototype here, and we've already gone and created a web prototype, but I'm going to show you how to create those different devices. So when you go to create a new screen, you'll now see this drop down that lets you choose a device. So the default here, because we've chosen a web prototype, is web, but we can go ahead and choose iPhone X or iPhone 10 and click OK. And now we have that device type reflected as another screen. So here's our web screen and here's our mobile screen. And we can, of course, keep going and add different types of devices as we'd like. So we can add an iPad device if we'd like. So with all of these different devices, you'll now be able to show each version of your design that you would like your reviewers to see. So you might have your web version, your mobile version, and your tablet all within one file. So you can get your reviewers can get the overall feeling of the designs you're working to create. All right, so that's how to create a new device, but let's show how that might look once you've created a prototype. Let's open up this example that we've created previously. So in this multi-device example, we have a basic web page that we've gone ahead and created. But if you look over here to the screens palette, you'll see that we also have a mobile version that we've scaled down. And we also have a tablet version. So all three different types of this design within one file. But now let's show you how you can have some more precision when showing people your designs. So if we go to simulate this design, all right, one thing that you'll notice here at the top of the screen is a drop-down that says original width or full browser width. So as I mentioned before, this original width will let you set a width that this prototype will always appear as, regardless of the size of the screen of who's viewing it. So if your colleague or your stakeholder reviewer has a much larger or smaller screen than you, this prototype will always appear as its original width. So you can get everybody will see the same thing. There won't be any confusion with something looking different than you originally intended. However, if you are creating a responsive prototype and would like to show that off, you can click on that drop down and choose full browser width. And this will expand the prototype to the full browser that you have. So right now, this is not a responsive prototype. So it is not filling up the rest of the screen. If it were responsive, it would expand to the full browser width. So let's go ahead and make those changes just so we can see how they might look. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is select this right arrow. And we're going to go to the Properties palette and click on Display Pin Position Options. We're going to pin this to the right. So now whenever the screen expands or the width expands or contracts, this will always remain pinned to the right of the screen. We're going to add maybe a 25 pixel margin, just so that it's not right at the end. The next thing we're going to do is pin this header here. We're going to go and pin it to the center of the screen. It's already in the center, so it's not moving right now, but you'll see as we simulate that it will stay in the center. Next thing we're going to do is change this background. And instead of pin position, we're going to change its width to be 100%. So now this background will always take up 100% of the width of the screen. The last thing we're going to do is scroll all the way down here and make this footer responsive, or at least just the footer background. So let's go down here again, and we're going to change the width to 100%. Okay, let's simulate to see those changes. Okay, so right now this is, again, the original width. So everybody is seeing the same thing. But if we go ahead and change it to full browser width, you can see that some of the elements that we've designated as responsive are expanding or remaining pinned as we've defined them. So again, we can go back and everything will remain the same as we defined it originally. So this drop down here is just a quick way to show your main designs and your responsive design, or at least in this case, you're partly responsible. You're partly a responsive design. Okay, guys, that is the overview of multi-device and expanding or showing the original width of the canvas. The next thing we're going to show and explain is linking to scenarios. So we're going to go to another example that we've created. Okay, so this example here illustrates how you might have a flow between two different interfaces. So in this example, we have a manager dashboard, and we also have an employee view. So we have two different views here, and we're just illustrating how you might have that flow. So once you have all of that design laid out, you can create a scenario for that design. And we've created several scenarios already. So we have a design flow, which shows you how the design or how the interfaces will flow together. We also have a user flow for each individual user. So we have a user flow for the manager, and we also have a user flow for the employee. So all of this put together, the scenarios and the multi-device, you'll be able to show exactly how you'd like your prototype to appear to others, as well as that narrative that you're working to create. It will be much more clear with scenarios that you've created, as well as linking to them within that prototype itself. So let's go back to the user interface and show you how this might work. So let's simulate. All right, so here is just the manager view. We're just using a dashboard here. We're going to click on this, and here is a manager view of a dashboard for an employee in particular. So the manager, in this case, maybe they add a new task, call Bob. Adding a new task for the employee to do, we submit. We see that it has been submitted. And now we're linked to the scenario that shows us our design flow. So it may be confusing for your reviewer if they're going through your prototype through simulation and all of a sudden they are now within a different device view. If you insert a link to scenario before linking to that different screen, it will help your reviewers understand the design flow that you're working to create. And with the notes that we've created here, we also have some more clarity for that. So we see that there's an action. They click on the employee, and then they click on log out, and we'll see the employee view. And we also have a note here just to make that even more clear for the reviewer. So we can go back to the manager detail here. We can click on it, and a dialog will appear that lets you simulate the scenario itself, or just go to the screen. In this case, we're just going to go to the screen. All right, we're back here, and that task is still there. We're going to click on log out. Now we're at the employee view. So we see that the manager has added a new task. This is just an illustration of how that flow works. Okay. And I'm also going to show you guys how you can use scenarios to show a particular user flow. So we've already showed you the design flow. In this case, we're going to show you how you might use scenarios for an employee, or rather a user flow. And in this case, we'll click on here, and now we see the second user flow that we've created. So we see the employee views their dashboard or their home screen, and then they can click and see their own dashboard. And we just have some placeholder screens here just to show you how you might continue to expand that scenario as you add more detail in screens to that prototype. Okay, so those are the main changes to or the expansion of linking to scenarios and scenarios in general. All right, we're going to add actually, we're going to go back to this first example and show you some of the design changes that we've made. So we're going to click on this paragraph, this header, and we're going to show you the refinement to change style events. So we go to create an event. We have the same menu as always, and we go to change style. And now we'll see that this event in particular has changed. So we'll see select styles to change. And we can choose any one of these individual properties to change, as well as even more under this arrow. So we're going to change the decoration. We're going to make this underlined. And if, for example, you actually wanted to change a different property and not underline it, you can click on this icon here, and it will delete that event. But we can go ahead and add that back. Okay. To add another part to this event, we're going to go back up to the drop-down and change the color. We're going to change the color to blue. Okay? All right, and we can simulate to see how that's actually, you know what, let's change this from on click to on mouse over, as you might have, as you see on many different designs and different websites in general. Okay, so if we mouse over, we see that the color has changed and the text has also been underlined. But, and here's a key difference between this version and previous versions. If you change the text style, those events will still be maintained. So if we change this to a different font and we simulate again, those events are still maintained. So you don't have to worry if you decide to change your font or font style when you're designing. The events that you created early on will still be reflected when you're changing the style. And while we're here, let's show you another change that we've made. If we go and up here to this background dropper, we will now see that you can add transparency to a color. So if we change this background, maybe, sure, and we can change the transparency. Okay. So for those of you who'd like to define your colors by the color itself and its transparency, that should be much easier for you now that you can designate a transparency. Okay. Let's get rid of that background color. All right, another powerful feature I want to show you guys are margins. So let's create a new screen. So I can show you guys all of the different ways that you can use margins. So if we drag a rectangle onto the canvas and we go over to the properties palette, we scroll down and we expand margin. You'll see these options to adjust the margin on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. And we can apply individual margins to parts of that element. So for those of you who like to define an element by not only its space on the canvas, but also its spacing relative to other elements on the canvas, this will be really helpful for you. So we're going to add a 10 pixel margin on the right. And we see that the outline of the element has expanded accordingly to consider and include that margin. We're also going to add a 20 pixel margin on the bottom. Next thing we're going to do is copy and paste. And when we drag that on here, it will automatically snap to the margin that you've defined. So we can just keep copying and pasting, and it will snap right in. One thing that you can note is if we, for example, group these in our dynamic panel, and then change that dynamic panel to have a wrap. Actually, let's change, before we do that, let's change its layout, and then we'll wrap. Okay, and you can just keep copying and pasting that rectangle, and the margin will still be reflected. The one that you've defined earlier will still be here, and if you just keep copying and pasting, they will all wrap within that margin that you've defined earlier. And if you've gone and created all of these widgets that you would like to use over and over again, you can create a custom widget library and include those in there. So let's go to widgets and new widget library, just to show you guys how you would do that. So we can right click on here, add to widget library. Okay, so now that widget is in our own widget library and it can be used over and over again. If we delete that and then drag it back up, there it is. There's all those margins still reflected. Same properties as we've defined before. So that's one aspect of the usefulness of margins. You can save them to your own widget library to create reusable widgets that you can use for many different prototypes. And you can define an element by its spacing relative to other elements. But another thing that margins are useful for is for facilitating responsive design with spacing that is maintained regardless of the screen size. So to show you guys that, we're going to drag a rectangle onto the canvas, and we're going to change its margin to 10 pixels on the right. The next thing we're going to do is change its width to 50%. You can drag that to the end. Now we're going to drag another rectangle onto the canvas, snap that right into that margin, and change its width to 50%. Last thing we're going to do to show you how these will be responsive is pin this to the right. Okay, so let's simulate this to see how these margins are maintained. We're going to change the width to full browser width. And as we expand and contract the width of this prototype or the simulation, you can see that the margin has been maintained. So you won't have to worry about responsive widgets that you've created, the spacing getting strange looking as you expand the width. That margin will be maintained as you go if you choose to add a margin. All right, another thing I have to show you guys today involves the improvements that we've made to the Android widget library. So we've gone ahead and made the Android widget library itself responsive. So we add a new Android phone. We'll minimize these other widgets here, and we go to Android phone. And if we drag a screen on there, okay. And here I'll take this opportunity to show you guys how you can drag and drop to resize a screen. So if you select the base screen in the outline palette, you'll see these indicators appear where you can change the height and the width. So we'll drag it. Okay, and because these are responsive, the widgets themselves have changed to reflect the different width that we've defined. And this responsiveness is also reflected even if you change the orientation of the screen. So we'll change it to landscape. And all of those widgets have changed accordingly. So they are they are moving and reflecting the responsive parameters that we've defined for them. While we're here, we'll show you guys how you can group elements that are already grouped. So we'll go back to the screen up here to show you that. So we have all these elements right here at the top of the screen. They're all grouped in this one group called Promo 4. And we can see them defined here in the outline. So if we just go ahead and select all of them, then Command or Control G, you can see that they have been grouped in a group themselves. So if you'd like to define everything really particularly, name everything you're doing, stay really organized, grouping within groups can be really helpful for that. So those are the main changes that we've made to the Justinmind software itself, but there are a few other changes that we've made to our online server or your online account that I'd like to show you today. So if we open this up here, so we've changed the developer view. So if you have a developer on your team and you've added them as a developer in your online account, before they would see all of the projects that you were working on. But if you just want them to see, or rather now they will just see the projects that they have been added to. And this is reflected both online, on their online account on the web they access, and this is also indicated on the Justinmind View on Device mobile application. So if they sign in there, they will only see the projects they're working on. The last thing I have to show you guys today are some changes we've made to emails for reviewers. So if you're a reviewer and you've never created a Justinmind account before, when you're invited to review a prototype, you'll see this link at the bottom of the screen. So this will invite you to create a password and create your reviewer account. And this is really useful if you're planning on reviewing many different prototypes. So instead of having to go through your email and find all of those different invitation emails, you can log into your online account as a reviewer, and you'll see all of the different prototypes you've been invited to review. Okay, guys, that is all of the changes that we've made to the version 8.4. I hope that you've found them useful as you're using Justinmind, this explanation. But now let's get to some questions that we have. Let's see. Do both device types appear in the export to HTML? Yes. So if you export your prototype to HTML to send to others to view the simulation without needing to go to the online account, yes, both device types will be reflected. You'll see both the web and the web and the iPhone or mobile version that you've created. Let's see. How do I make a responsive prototype? It's a good question. Let's show you that quickly. So as we showed before, if you select a widget or an element and go to the properties palette, there are a few ways you can make it responsive, that element responsive. So you'll click on display pin position options and you'll see the X parameter and the Y parameter. In this case, we change this to be pinned to center. So this will always be in the center of the screen, regardless of how small or large that screen is. The other thing that you can do to make this responsive is change the width and the height. So if we click on this drop down, we will be able to change it to a percentage. In this case, we don't want to change this to a percentage because we don't want this this text to expand and contract that way. But of course, you could do that if you'd like. All right, so that's the main overview of how to create a responsive prototype. Let's see, other questions. Are the scenarios always one-to-one, or can they be many? I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at there, but if you're talking about scenarios in general, they could really be anything that you'd like to define. They don't even have to necessarily involve the elements that you've created in your prototype itself. You can, like we showed earlier, you can just drag a screen icon and define that. So if you are working on creating the design itself, but you know how you want it to act, how you want that scenario, those actions to play out, you can drag these icons here and illustrate how that will play out. So you can define a scenario any way you would like. If I add an element to a desktop view, how can I easily add it also to other views like tablet and mobile? If I edit the text or style of an element, does it apply to all views? It's a great question. So you would want to use masters for that. So if we go back to the user interface, and right now, so if we go and create a master, you can go to your widgets and drag an element out here, and you can define it as responsive. So if we change this rectangle to the width is always 100%. Okay. And if we go back to this screen, we drag this master, it will be 100% of the screen. And if we go to mobile, for example, drag that master, it will be 100% of that screen as well. So if you'd like to create elements to be used in different types of screens, different device types, masters would be a really good way of doing that. I see a few more specific questions here. And I'd encourage you to send in a question to, oh wait, here we go. How to upgrade an existing prototype created in 8.2 to 8.4. Are there any considerations in mind when opening an older prototype in 8.4? One thing you want to note is that if you save that prototype that's been created in an older version, someone with that older version will not be able to open it. So if you've made some changes to that prototype in your newer version and save it, send it back to that person with the older version, they won't be able to open it. So if you're working with someone with an older version, you should keep that in mind and try to either go to their version or have them come up to your newer version so that there won't be any confusion there and possibly lost changes. Okay, so all right, yeah, again, I see a few more specific questions here, but please send them anything about pricing, anything about language, anything like that. Send it to justinmind.com/community, and we'll get to that right away. Or if you have any specific questions actually on pricing, sending an email to jim.sales@justinmind.com. They can help you with that. that would be the best place to send that to. All right, guys. So that is all the features that we've added in 8.4. Thank you so much for attending the webinar today. I hope you found this useful. And again, this will be sent out over email, the recording, right after we finish today. So if you want to go ahead and review this again, feel free to do so. And again, thanks so much for attending, and I'll see you guys in the next one.